So I'm here to make a short presentation and then invite my colleagues to speak about the retirement savings for all. So now 10 minutes to frame the topic. We're going to talk about knowledge digitization. So I am the FinTech thought leader of IBM Industry Academy, which is a worldwide responsibility that brings together financial institutions, startup people, the regulators, technology companies. But I don't want to forget each and every one of you, because ultimately we have to consume technology. And I'm also the author of FinTech Innovation, which is the Robo-Advisor Bible worldwide. Now, FinTech is about transforming financial services to make sure that financial products are not the center stage of the universe. Actually, technology itself is not the center of the universe. At the center of the universe, we have the client. It's about making sure that we create solutions that provide value to the final users, which is about each and everybody of us. Now, think about the history of robo-advisors, which is very recent, but very telling. There are people like me that like to sit on the couch, put the feet on the table, and let the robo-advisor, powered by artificial intelligence in some cases, make any decision for their financial life. But I think the majority of people, and many people in the crowd today, prefer to talk to a coach instead of sitting on the couch, because people need to get into a conversation when they have to make cunning financial decisions. And this is very important to learn, which explains why the robo-advisors started very fast, but their growth faltered a little bit because users were not really ready worldwide to onboard on the digital solution. What is the problem? There is a fundamental mistake that Silicon Valley made in understanding banking and finance, and we need to get that straight. You know this one? This is an iPhone. So this is technology, which is what I call pull technology. That means it's a technology of the demand. But when we make financial decisions for our retirement, for the investment, we operate into a push mechanism. So the banking industry is an offer-driven business, but technology like digital is basically a pull demand-driven technology. One of my colleagues, for example, Annamaria Lusardi, she would never tell me, Paolo, let's take a look at what is going on Amazon. You wouldn't do that. You go on Amazon with a purpose. You want to buy one of my books, and then you buy another book. So basically, you are demand-driven. But when it comes to finance, you need to think about it very carefully, right? And you don't know what to decide. I'll give you this other example. I am Italian. I live in Germany. My family is in Italy. And every Saturday, I fly to Milano. And my role in the family is the grocery. My wife wants me to do the grocery every Saturday morning. So what do? I go to the supermarket and I start pulling from the shelves my milk, my soap, my wine. And then I see an advertisement with George Clooney shampooing his beard, and I decide to change my consumption. I buy a different shampoo. It's pushed to me. But the majority of decisions I make are pull, demand-driven. I know what I want. My cart, 90% of my cart is the same every week. But very few people, when they have some money, will go to the bank and say, can you give me that UCTS compliant fund that invests 30% of the stock in Italian equities and between 12 and 13 in equities out of Singapore and broader Asia? Very few people do that. Because people have cognitive biases, and these cognitive biases are also there when they use technology. But remember, the psychology of the consumer is not the psychology of the investor. So when we play digital, we need to make sure we respect that. I'll give you one example of this cognitive bias that people have. When I flew to Singapore, it was a long-haul flight with Lufthansa, and the food is German, it's not like Italian food. So when I arrived, I was starving. So at the airport at Changi, I bought myself a sandwich, and they said it's $10 US. Then I took my taxi, traffic to get into Singapore, a lot of rain. And when I arrived to the hotel, I was still starving. So I went to the street, Raffles Street, and I found a bar, an Italian place, and I bought another sandwich. And they said, Paolo, this is $20 US. And like, come on, I spent $10 at the airport. But they said, but this is with prosciutto di Parma. You know prosciutto di Parma? It's tasty Italian food. Wouldn't you pay for prosciutto di Parma? Now, when it comes to consumption, I have an idea of the value for money. But when it comes to investing, think about it. You have a US global investment fund. It costs you 200 basis points. And there is a world stock ETF. It costs you 50 basis points. Which one do you choose? I don't know. Maybe I spend less money, but I miss out something because the other one is managed by a better investment advisor or manager, whatever else. So people have a hard time in understanding this. So a lot of guys thought of fighting on digital by using the price points. So they give your robo-advisor almost for free. It doesn't mean that everybody will use it because people don't understand the value for money, but they understand when they buy something. The second problem is time matters. You see this jacket? When I bought this jacket, I was very happy. I liked it. And I went home, and my wife looked at me and said, Paolo, this is a blue jacket. Come on, your color is gray. Go and change it. So now I was left with a cunning decision to go and change it or to keep it. Don't put me on social media now because she will see me. And I had a fight with my wife, right? But now, when you make an investment decision, when will you be happy? Tomorrow is not a Bitcoin that goes up 40%. Maybe in 1 week, maybe in 1 year, maybe we'll never be happy because it will be another financial crisis. And when the market goes down, you cannot bring it back and change it. So time plays a very different game in finance compared to consumption. And that is the reason why we have an asymmetry of information in banking that we don't see in consumption. So now you know this cartoon. This clip is taken from South Park, a US cartoon. The little kid has some money. He goes to the bank. He wants to invest the money. Let's listen carefully to what happens. This was live in 2009 in the US.
I got a $100 check from my grandma, and my dad said I need to put it in the bank so it can grow over the years.
Well, that's fantastic. A really smart decision, young man. We can put that check in a money market mutual fund. Then we'll reinvest the earnings into foreign currency accounts with compounding interest, and it's gone.
What's all gone?
The money in your account. It didn't do too well. It's gone.
What do you mean? I have $100.
Not anymore, you don't. Poof.
Well, what can I do to get back
I'm sorry, sir, but this line is for bank members only.
I just opened an account.
Do you have any money invested with this bank?
No, you just lost it all.
Then please stand aside for people who actually have money with us. Next, please.
Okay, these things don't happen in Singapore, all in the US, okay? But anyway, the key element here, this was live on TV in the US, is that the little kid, he does not understand banking. He does not understand finance. That's why he relies upon a conversation, and he entrusts this conversation to make cunning financial decisions. So this means that the key element for digital, for a successful digitization, is that one that digitizes knowledge, not products, because trust is knowledge. The moment digital will help banks or will be capable itself to transfer knowledge to the individual, it will be do really good for the society and it will be self-sustained. All banks and FinTech that think of digitizing products, they will not succeed because the final consumers will not be capable of understanding finance the way the FinTech entrepreneurs assume. So now, the heart of everything for a successful FinTech innovation is the digitization of knowledge. When I discuss digitization of knowledge, so people say, Paolo, go back to university. This is a complex topic. It's very theoretical. What is this digitization of knowledge? And you know what? You might remember this movie. This is The Wolf of Wall Street. Now, Hollywood is not reality, but anticipates reality by and large. So if you remember in this clip, Leonardo DiCaprio explains to his colleagues how to sell penny stocks on the phone. 20 years ago, the phone was like digital today, right? So let's listen carefully to what Leonardo DiCaprio says. I will excuse myself. This is plenty of bad words. It's not me, it's Hollywood. Listen carefully.
Sorry, I appreciate the call. I really have to give this some thought and talk to my wife about it. Can I call you back?
They don't know, right? They gotta think about it, they gotta talk to their fucking wives or the fucking tooth fairy. Point is, it doesn't matter what the fuck they say. The only real objection that they have is that they don't trust you guys. And why should they trust you? I mean, look at you, you're a bunch of fucking sleazy salesmen, right? So.
I'm the only salesperson in the room, okay? So now, if you listen carefully, what he said, the client does not know, even though he doesn't know. Why doesn't he buy from you? Because he doesn't trust you. Trust is knowledge. These are the two verbs which are the pillar of this clip. That's why the essence of digital should be to help banks, entrepreneurs, financial advisors to digitize knowledge. When I get to this point, people say, well, Paolo, so we don't care about digital, right? Because knowledge is trust. Trust is a warm relationship. We need to look each other in the eyes. Well, this is true, but something is happening. Artificial intelligence is becoming more and more conversational. The day artificial intelligence will be truly deeply conversational, my iPhone will go from being pull technology into being push economy, and the circle is closed. So what do we do in the meantime? Whether this happens or not, the future will tell us. Well, we can use artificial intelligence to help financial advisors digitize knowledge to provide more added value to the respective customers. So the essence of the message today is that digitized knowledge means scaling competencies. If we use digital to scale people competencies, bankers, and final investors, we will do something good and we will create sustaining innovation. So I thank you very much for the attention you dedicated to this introductory speech. You'll find some of this material in one of my bestsellers, FinTech Innovation. And I'm happy to invite the remaining of my panel, these amazing people, to join me on stage so that we have a conversation about retirement savings for all. Thank you. From all over the world. So we may have more slides, so we're going to ask and address some questions to our panelists. You need to put them on, please. So can you just introduce yourself very briefly so that I make sure that that remains in the mind of people. So Harry, we start from you. You are a chairman.
Sorry?
You are a chairman, a president?
Anything helps. No, I'm an independent strategist working globally. My background is in payments and pensions and investments. And I'm also part of Global Financial Literacy Excellence Center, and I'm part of the Internationally Advisory Board.
Okay. Gautam.
Thanks, Paolo. My name is Gautam Bhardwaj. I work with pinBox Solutions, which is the only global fintech enterprise which is focused specifically on digital pension inclusion in developing countries.
Diana.
Hello, everybody. I'm Diana Crossan from New Zealand. I was the Retirement Commissioner in New Zealand, and currently I'm very proud to be the chair of the International Advisory Board for the Global Centre for Financial Literacy Excellence in Washington.
And then we have Annamaria.
So I am the founder and academic director of the Global Financial Literacy Excellence Center, which is actually based at the George Washington University School of Business in Washington, D.C.
Thank you very much. So as you noticed, I spoke about the digitization of knowledge. So knowledge is an essential part when it comes to make financial decisions, to create a robust ecosystem that looks into the 2020 and beyond. So Diana, I think it's relevant to explain or define what financial literacy is, so that we also learn from you why that's so important to create a robust financial ecosystem going forward.
Okay, well, thank you very much for inviting us to come and talk about financial literacy to the Singapore FinTech Festival. It's very exciting to be here. Financial literacy has been defined in many ways, but I'm going to read to you a very clear, simple definition of financial literacy. It is the ability to make informed judgments and make effective decisions regarding the use of money and the management of money. Let me read that again. The ability to make informed judgments and make effective decisions regarding the use and management of money. One thing I must say right at the beginning, and all of you must know this, is that ignorance is not an option. In many parts of the world, the real concern is that people are at the finance industry, FinTech, all sorts of people think that the population doesn't need to know. And we are very strong on the fact that it's not an option for people not to know, not to have the information, not to have the knowledge that Paolo talked about before. So I've been working years ago with the Monetary Authority of Singapore and Money Sense. You're very lucky, for those of you who live in Singapore. I think you've got a strong financial literacy centre. And what I wanted to do was just say also that financial literacy can't stand alone. it's important that the population know and are educated in financial matters, but it's also important that we have 7 other components to make it work. The first one is a thriving economy with competitive and effective markets. It's fairly obvious at this conference that people understand that. The second one is that we have effective and efficient regulation. And of course, the Monetary Authority is one of the sponsors and one of your regulators in Singapore. The third one is the consumer protection against scams and fraud. It's important that that happens as well. Paolo talked before about trust. The fourth one is a trustworthy financial services sector. Now, when I was working in the Retirement Commission in New Zealand, we talked about a trusted financial services sector. But we all know what happened in 2008-9. The finance sector was trusted and shouldn't have been in many cases. So we changed it to trustworthy. They need to be trustworthy, the financial services sector. The fifth one is a diversified market with diversified financial products and services. Pretty obvious. The sixth one is not always quite so obvious, and that is that consumers have to be able to exercise their market power. So in some countries where they can't do that, the system breaks down. And the seventh one is a safety network of welfare for those people who just don't make it in our system. So all those things need to work together, and financial literacy is a very important component of all that in order that the citizens have financial well-being.
So basically, we learned that financial literacy is a component among many others to make a robust financial system that encompasses trustworthy banks and trustworthy fintechs.
Yes.
I would also say consumer behavior, consumer protection, the problem of growth, which is impacting decision making. So all of this needs to be accounted for. But at the heart is always financial literacy.
You said before the client is at the centre and the client needs to be financially literate. And in order for these kind of things to happen, the Global Centre was begun, and Annamaria was the first director and is the current director, and she's going to tell us more about that.
So let's pass the ball, the microphone to Annamaria. So basically you're a director of the GFLEC, which is the Global Financial Literacy Excellence Center. Mm-hmm. And you also published a couple of researches as the GFLEC that I want to ask about. So what is the GFLEC?
Mm-hmm. So we mean everything in the name. So we are global. We focus on financial literacy, and we try to do the best and most relevant research in this field. And of course, the field now is very much about FinTech. So I'm here actually to talk about the 2 reports that we have written on FinTech, but I'm here to tell you first that financial literacy is essential to make FinTech successful. So we need it. We need financial literacy in addition to the use of technology. And I'm very happy to echo what the first speaker, Chris Colbert, mentioned this morning, which is we really need financial literacy. And financial literacy is going to be very essential for the success of FinTech. The reason why I say that is precisely because of the report we have written. We have actually written a first report a year ago looking at the use of the FinTech. And what we did show, unfortunately, is that the people who use mobile payments, so those who use the phone to make payment or use their watch, unfortunately, are also those who have the worst financial outcomes. So these are the people who are more likely to overdraw from their checking accounts, they are less likely to save out of their income, and they are a lot more likely to borrow at a very high cost. So, technology sometimes is not necessarily conducive to good financial behavior. But our research also shows that those who use FinTech and are financially literate are a lot much better. They do not go to those worse outcomes. So, we have actually a copy of these reports here. We did this in collaboration with one of the largest pension funds in the US, the TIA Institute. And we have worked with companies like PwC to actually look really carefully at this effect of financial literacy. And again, I want to repeat what I mentioned earlier, that financial literacy is an essential skill today to be able to navigate a world where technology allows us to make payment at the instant, where at the push of a button we can transfer money. And we need, in a sense, to make good financial decisions, and that good financial decision is a combination of technology and knowledge.
So Anna, this report was looking at the whole population or just the millennials?
Just the millennials, actually.
Very specific to the
we focus on the
users.
millennial because they are the bigger user of technology.
So basically what you're telling the audience is that FinTech is there to empower investors, but it should empower financial literate investors, otherwise it can have negative consequences because when we are self-directed and we don't know, we may not make necessarily the right mistakes. So there has to be a balance, and financial literacy helps us to get the best out of technology, otherwise we may not. It's a very interesting, I invite you to download or to check the report. You find it on the gflag.org, which is the website of the Global Financial Literacy Excellence Center. And that takes me to a question to Harry, because we need to make cunning financial decisions. We can use digital, and one of these is retirement. If we look at the robo-advisors, like the US robo-advisors, more than 50% of investors using a robo-advisor invest into the safety net pocket, which is about retirement. Now, there are pros and there are cons. So how can financial literacy help make better investment decisions for the pension conundrum?
Yeah, well, given the fact that we are all professionals here in the room, I'm 63 years old, and just 3 years ago I start thinking about my pensions.
Oh.
Being part of the Netherlands, having a very good system, number one on the Mercer, I still found out I came short, so I have to work longer. And realizing this, being financially savvy, I thought, means that financial literacy is of all nations, of all people. It's not something for underdeveloped countries or something like that. So I think that's quite essential. So I would imagine that half of this room never thinks about their pension. So I think that's already one thing. What also struck me in what Anna just mentioned is, how can we embed financial literacy into our systems? And then I'm thinking about the youth and about our education. And I really personally would plead for personal economics as a topic, a subject in schools, starting from grammar school up to university, so into your entire school career, and use it in math and history and physics classes to really realize what the impact is of the interest, how long you have to save to have a compounded number so you can really enjoy it when you are 65, 67 or 70 in the future. So I think these elements are very important, and I think our school system needs more than that. And one other remark I want to make on that is that we see nowadays a lot of financials offering all kinds of packages to schools to help them realizing that saving is important to the kids. I think most of the schools are a bit tired of all these efforts of the financials, although it's well meant, of course, and I really think a lot of people appreciate this. But I think we need more than that. I think it should be part of the educational system itself.
So we need to ingrain financial literacy a lot more into the educational system, because it's such a bore. So the bore is not you, it's the topic. Many people don't want to think about that, and me myself, I started thinking about my pension when I was 50, but I remember my father telling me in my 20s, Paolo, save your money, think about retirement. Somehow it's difficult for us to focus on that.
Yeah, and the period you need to build up a pension, which is a sustainable pension for the last 20 years of your life probably, will take about 40 years of working, so a fifth of your income will be reserved every year for 40 years to make it able to have 70% of your last wage as a pension. So that's quite an effort, and you need to start very young with that.
So Gautam, we have a question from the audience. So they're asking, without financial education, are technology investments useless? You are the startup entrepreneur here on the panel, so what do you think?
Well, I think So one, I mean, I agree with the panel completely that retirement literacy is a very key ingredient. And I work in developing countries. And we're currently in about a half a dozen countries between Africa and Asia. What we find, however, is that the value of financial literacy or retirement literacy when people join a program tends to quite rapidly depreciate. So what I know on day one about the scheme, the benefits, the process, the services, and my responsibilities tends to disappear from my head, say if I'm 6 months or a year down the line. So I think what you need to do is perhaps use technology to be able to address some of the questions here.
Okay, so let's say thinking about retirement sometimes is complex and difficult. So if I try to digitize complexity, I go nowhere. So how does simplicity play a role in designing a digital solution that provides value to the final investors? Because I guess that's what pinBox does.
Okay, yeah. So basically what we do is in each country, we leverage, or we help governments, regulators, and financial institutions to leverage existing financial inclusion infrastructure, including digital payments, national IDs, etc., to create a very simple, integrated solution. So technology then plays the role of, shall I say, glue in bringing together most of the pieces that we are seeing exist in most of the developing countries. But if I take a step back, I think what is happening here is that there are two kinds of battles. One is how do you convince a person who is 20 years old to set aside a small part of her income.
I want to see everybody rushing out and put some money on the side after your answer, okay? They're all 20 years old here. So how do they do that?
Well, okay, so in Rwanda, for instance, we've just recently launched Africa's first completely digital pension scheme.
Okay.
What we are finding is, so over there, we've done two things. Basically, we've broken up the battle into two parts. One is the battle that all of us are agreeing with, which is how do you do financial literacy, right? That's a battle for the field. But a lot of the battle can actually be fought and won in a room like this, where you can design simple processes. So in Rwanda, you actually use your national ID and maybe a USSD if you have a feature phone to open a pension account, and it takes about a minute to open a pension account in the field from anywhere in the country. The system allows you to make anytime contributions using a mobile wallet.
So it's an enabler.
It's an enabler, right? And then there are things like you can set automated reminders. We have a system where you receive a pension bill. It's like an invoice, like any other.
Sorry. A pension is not an invoice. It's not a bill, is it?
Well, so it's the way we think about this is at a behavioral level. We find that all of us are much more tuned to making, honoring our bill payment commitment, right? But voluntary savings always takes the back seat, and it always invariably comes after all other expenses are taken care of. So what we've done is we've converted a voluntary pension contribution into an invoice. So you actually receive a bill, which is like any other utility bill, and you pay the pension bill like you pay any other utility bill payment.
So you recognize a cognitive bias of individuals. They might pay bills not safe. So you try to rephrase it using technology in a way that it becomes more acceptable and therefore accessible, so you can reinforce it. Interesting. So now, the question from the audience, which is, without financial education, are technology investments useless? I would say that every bank, every FinTech has at the core a role of financial education. So in reality, if you digitize knowledge by making your behavioral more understandable, accessible, you reinforce it, and you help people understand what you're doing, you provide financial education. So I actually see it in a way that the technology investment is a good investment where it helps achieving a goal of financial literacy for the final users that have the iPhone at their hand.
Yeah, Paolo, I think one essential part of that is also collaboration.
Collaboration.
What we do see a lot is proprietary solutions, and pensions are a complex thing. It's not just the money you get from your employer, perhaps. It's what you save yourself. It's your mortgage. Are all the financial contracts that are in multiple places. So how can you aggregate all that data? So all that reserved money you have into one spot that you see every day, that you are confronted with your balance sheet, so to speak, of the future, so you can control and monitor that. that needs collaboration. So financials should realize that the banks are not client ownership. The clients, the participants in schemes, are the owner of the data and should be able to aggregate that data. I think that's very essential.
Yes, I agree with you. Also, from a technological perspective, the future is about platforms when it comes to digital. Platform means bringing a lot of things together. And one of the mistakes of the FinTech, if I can say, is that FinTech started dividing themselves into pay tech, wealth tech, credit tech, insure tech, which is this stage. In reality, it's about client tech, because it's about us and all of the different financial needs we have during our personal, life-related and financial journey. So then, Diana, we are becoming more and more digital. I would say that in this part of the world, because I come from Italy, many people are effectively born digital. You can just think about what happens in China. It blows your mind. So now digital is the norm, and which is the role of financial literacy into this new digital era?
Yes, well, I think there's two parts to this. I know we're certainly digitalising very fast in some countries. Nobody else in the audience in this whole room will remember pre-digital finances. When I was a child in rural New Zealand, we could go to the grocery store and we could say, we could buy things by saying, put it down, and the grocer would write it in a book and send us a bill once a month to the family. It was all credit pre-digital. Then along came Visa, MasterCard and other such cards. And what was fascinating was that the advertisements for those new digital ways of payment had nothing in the advertisements about the fact that you needed to save the money first. There was no suggestion in any of those advertisements that it was your responsibility to have money to back the zip-zap, back the payment by Visa. The suggestion was you could take this card and go and buy the world. And the financial literacy behind it was non-existent in the early days. Things have changed, and it's really important. And because, of course, people are now almost born with their digital watch or their iPhone, we need financial education a lot more. We need it in schools. We need it because people are using technology younger and younger. I think there's two sides to the technology. One of them is that it's how you make the payments, how you make your investment. So there's a responsibility on the technology people, you folk. There's a responsibility also on the financial provider to make sure that there is an awareness about what the client is getting into. I think that's one side of it. The other side we haven't seen yet. And that is, how do we use technology to remind the customer or the client they're about to go into debt? I think there are things we can do that will help a customer. At the moment, you can go a long way into debt before somebody tells you. Imagine if you had a card and you're about to pay something and it comes up and it says, this will put you into debt. Before, at the supermarket or at the whatever. It's possible, but who's going to pay? And I think there's a whole lot we can do with technology that will help the customer, alert them to what they already should know. And so I think there's a combination. And I think that I should finish with the third one, which of course is technology that helps the education.
Okay.
And schools and businesses and the community, how do we use the technology to train and educate people around financial education?
So I like your example, it's very telling. I spoke about pull and push before. So pull is when we buy something. So now that we have our QR code on our mobile app, we are really one click away to do things,
yes,
to buy stuff.
Yes.
And that's very easy. Our psychology is designed basically to like the idea of buying stuff. But then investing and saving is more on the push side because we don't always see the relevance of that, or we need to make cunning financial decisions. Money is an emotional element. So in this push and pull mechanism, technology might create further asymmetry, if you like, reinforcing people behavior that instead we should not reinforce that way.
Yes.
So now the essence here is that If financial literacy is embedded or plays a relevant role in the technology development, we can create awareness. That's a word you also used in your speech right now. I like the word awareness because it really means elevating people. When we say empowering people, it means making them aware to act and to act in their own interest, which then becomes the interest of society overall.
And just one last thing, the technology we have been using, and many of you, I know that MoneySense in Singapore and in other countries close by, Malaysia and others, there are financial education tools online, and GFLEC, if you have a look at the website of GFLEC, you can see information, a lot of information to help you. And in New Zealand, we had a website that 37% of the population used in order to help them with their own financial literacy and financial decisions.
Okay, so I would like to move to Gautam again, and you've been working a lot in places like Africa, so really focusing on micro pensions, so recreating the behavior from the little steps that we make in our life, because that's so important. So can you just talk about your experience? And then we have a little video that I want to show that explains basically the concept, but if you could introduce that.
So, thanks, Paolo. What we do on financial literacy, and despite the, what we find is, despite the best efforts to cultivate knowledge and awareness at the front end, we find that invariably what we are never privy to is what is the conversation that happens between the last mile, the agent on the ground. What is the conversation that person has with the client is really key, because despite our best intentions, the final behavior is actually determined by that conversation. And we spent a lot of years never being privy, till we created a system, and again, which was using FinTech, was saying, can we ask clients a certain set of questions when they enroll? And can this be the responsibility of the agent on the ground to verify certain knowledge? Now, what we then start doing is every time a customer is enrolled, and this is in any of the countries we work in, he or she immediately receives a call back from a helpline using technology. And the helpline just gets a sort of a pop-up saying, okay, Gautam has now joined this pension scheme, and the helpline calls back to verify whether Gautam actually understands the answers to those questions correctly. And the agent's commissions and fees are linked to whether or not the customer has been able to correctly address those questions. So, I'm just saying, you can use technology quite effectively to do a lot of this stuff.
So basically, in the starting keynote, we showed a video with a little kid that goes to the bank and he gets into a conversation, right? Now we can get it right or wrong, that's a different story, but basically it always starts with a conversation between an individual, each and every one of us, and the agent, which is the provider of the financial solution, maybe for retirement. But then things happen afterwards, right? So now you're saying we can actually use technology to create a reinforcement mechanism that invites people again to continue their journey of financial literacy, to learn and to understand, so that we make sure they're always on the right track.
And you can automate reminders, you can do a lot of these things based on behavior if you're able to observe that behavior. And the best way to do that is actually using good MIS. Real-time MIS from the field.
Which also means not just replacing individual relationships, but integrating them and supporting them with technology. Absolutely. So now, what do we see on this video? We have a lady and her employer. Can you just introduce the video that we said?
This is basically using technology, but at the same time, addressing some of the questions on financial literacy for a population of domestic help. And domestic help are a population which exists in both OECD and developing countries. India has 40 million people who work as cooks, maids, drivers, security guards, etc.
Okay.
And so we created this technology platform to try and see how domestic help can be enrolled and correctly educated about
geared towards the developing world. Let's take a look in just a couple of minutes.
This is Shanta. She's 22 years old. She lives in a little village far away with a husband and 3 children. But her family struggles to make ends meet. So Shanta decides to migrate to your city in search of work. You employ her as your maid. She works long hours, she takes care of your children, she cooks your meals and keeps your house clean. She sends most of her income back home to support her family, to put food on their table and send her children to school so that they may have a better life than hers. She does this year after year after year. When she's too old to work, Shanta returns to her little village. Her children are now grown up, they are educated and married but have migrated to other cities. Shanta and her husband now live alone, but with no savings of their own, they struggle to make ends meet. They live without dignity and will live this way for the rest of their lives. But does it really have to be this way? Let's see this again. You employ Shanta as your maid. You talk to her about the importance of setting aside a small part of her income for her old age. And you spend just 10 minutes on the internet to help her open her own micropension account. And so, Shanta starts saving every month for her old age. Her savings are managed by the likes of LIC, UTI and SBI and will grow over the years. When she's too old to work, Shanta will return home to her little village. She and her husband will still live alone, but they won't struggle to make ends meet. Because of Shanta's micropension savings, they will now get a monthly pension and will live with dignity for the rest of their lives. This could be the story of your maid, your driver, your gardener or guard. Just 10 minutes of your life changed 20 years of Shanta's life. You can be that change. Gift Shanta a micropension account today. Her clock is already ticking.
Okay, that's fine. So that's very interesting. So thanks, Gautam. So basically, it's not just about governments providing money or pensions to people, but it's also helping people bottom up, being capable or enabled to take care of themselves, which will have a bigger impact on society overall at the end of this journey. So that's the relevance of micropensions in the bigger topic of retirement savings for all. Now, Harry, we saw this video is about a journey of an individual that basically does things in life towards basically the end of his journey and therefore pension. We've been talking about the transformation of many things at the FinTech Festival in Singapore, the end of technology, the end of finance. Maybe there's an end of pensions too. So what do you think about the problem of the continuation or the continuum in terms of financial adequacy?
Right. Well, I think pensions is a difficult topic, and I think we're doing quite well worldwide with the present systems, but I think it's not a sustainable situation. So I think more and more we have to take control ourselves, and still we can do collectively a lot. We can do the investments part collectively, we can do security elements collectively, but we should be much more in control on our own financial destination. So I would say that pensions really will mitigate to managing adequate financial continuity. So financial planning will be an integral part of our life, starting young until you get older. And why? Well, look at yourself. You know, lifetime employment is not any longer here. We have flex work, we work for multiple employers, we work longer because of aging. I'm 63, I told you. I will retire in the Netherlands already at 67 and a half. My son, 27, will retire when he's 74. We can already calculate that. In Singapore, we have more than 1,000 people aged over 100. So I think that gives you an indication. But also we have to manage illness, periods of illness, unemployment, periods that we need to study or need to focus on a new job. And in all these intervals, we have less income, like in pensions, and we need adequate income in those periods as well. So how can we fluctuate that part of our life cycle, and how can we support that? I think that's coming out of what we call traditionally the pension pot. Mm-hmm. And to make it individual, I think FinTech will come in greatly, probably by blockchain, because we need a one-on-one connection there. If blockchain will be scalable and will be more standardized, I think that's still a big challenge. And in the long future, 10 years from now, quantum technology might be a solution.
Okay, so you're thinking there is technology today that can be used to aggregate around our financial life a variety of elements in a secured way, crossing the borders. Retirement is not a topic for emerging markets versus developed markets is a topic for everybody,
Everybody,
right?
yeah.
With different, if you like, emphasis, but it's really a topic for everybody. Now, we've been talking about a few things in this panel. We started with Anna's research. You showed that millennials might consume more technology than others, but being one click away from your investments doesn't mean making a good thing if you don't understand what investing means. So that is the importance of financial literacy to go hand in hand with technology. Now we saw some examples of reinforcement mechanisms for micro pensions. Diana was discussing that financial literacy is one of the pillars. There are other pillars: trustworthy banks, trustworthy fintechs, consumer behaviors. So what else is still missing, Anna? So how do you think we can really make sure that financial literacy goes hand in hand with the technological shift? You also have started a new engagement in Italy, working with the Italian ministry. Maybe you can start from there and explain to us how do you see the future, which actions we need to take to make sure we really make it happen.
So we really need to connect the dots, which is what Diana and I think Ari and Gautam were saying. And we need to make sure that people understand, yes, you can make the payment, but it's important to have the money. Yes, we are going to live to 100, and this changes everything. And thinking about our pension is actually really hard. And that's why we need to create that ecosystem that really embeds now financial education, because we are so much more in charge, and there are no government or institution that can support people who live so long. So that's the good news and the bad news together. And so that's why I think it's critically important that we have financial literacy in the schools, because the new generations is going to face very different challenges, and we need to look ahead and prepare for that future. But that's not enough, because we also have a population which is out of the school. And that's why we need financial education in the workplace. And we need to find other ways to embed financial education. For example, gamification. For example, technology. And this is, by the way, what we are also doing in Italy. Almost every country, and in fact 70 countries, according to the OECD, have now started a financial literacy strategy. So they have an institution in charge of coordinating and in charge of designing policies to improve financial literacy and financial education, because there is also a social component to that perhaps firm cannot pick up. So I'm actually very proud and very happy to say that I am actually the director of this new financial education committee in Italy. And so please follow us on the initiatives that we are going to do. I'm actually very happy to be here in Singapore, because Singapore started those policy in 2003. Actually, New Zealand was probably one of the pioneers in this field. And so, we are, of course, engaged in all of these international experts to really have, finally, in Italy as well, financial literacy embedded in society.
So Diana, you want to comment?
Yes, please. I just want to call out to everybody in the audience. My huge worry is that you started by saying that at the click of a button or the click, we can just about do anything, which is exciting, it's efficient, it's full of opportunity, but it's really scary. And I'm going to be at the beach when you guys are worrying about financial literacy. I've got lots of other things to do, and I'm of the age where I'm allowed to go to the beach for a long time. But what really worries me, I don't want to be listening to the radio and hear that the next financial crisis was caused by financial technology, because you didn't take the people with you, because you didn't tell the customer what was happening. I'm really scared that the next crisis might be caused because we didn't give the population enough financial literacy to deal with the technology you're going to give them.
Go ahead and jump.
Can I just... I don't entirely agree with you. I think technology can be positively harnessed to and leverage, let's say, when we work in, say, Africa or South Asia and now in Latin America, what we find is that the problems are very similar. And we are finding, therefore, a lot of the solutions are very similar. So I think it's feasible to build the core principles of retirement literacy into technology and to build replicable models so that every country doesn't have to start from scratch and can actually leverage off, not only the local infrastructure, but also the global learnings in this area. And I think a lot of the behavioral aspects can actually be put into technology solutions to make them much more objective and much more effective.
So basically, we've been learning together today that there are pros and cons in the usage of technology when it comes to financial decision making. We basically debated the fact that financial literacy should go hand in hand with technology. Some might put more the accent on the literacy itself, others in the panel on the technology. But I like something that Anna said in the last answer. She spoke about gamification. She passed by very fast. Gamification is also the last chapter of my FinTech innovation book. Now, that links to the concept of behavior. We can actually use technology also to support a different way of creating financial literacy by gamifying concepts, by making sure that we reach out to people in simple terms, the way people can understand, so that we truly empower them. Now, you've been an amazing audience. I should not be sitting here, you should, because as we were talking, I saw the questions coming, and honestly, those questions are all reflected in the questions that I organized before. So maybe you had predictive analytics, you might have been using IBM Watson. Good job, guys. So I thank you for being here. I thank the panelists because this is, to me, the most important session of the Singapore FinTech Festival, because without financial literacy, we cannot make a good usage of technology. Thank you very much. Thank you.